Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the Worry-Free Retirement, with your host, retirement specialist and six-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
Last week on the Worry-Free Retirement, we covered the most important question a saver should ask themselves upon reaching retirement or nearing retirement, and here it is. Ready? Why take risk with your money when you don't have to? Today, as we record this show on April 8th, 2025, and the stock market currently in a free fall, I have decided to take an even deeper dive into this most important of all question for savers, and how Tony Walker Financial is equipped and experienced in helping so many savers protect more of their money by avoiding unnecessary risk with it. A process that includes safety, security, and liquidity, allowing our saver clients to use and enjoy more of their money without the fear of one day running out. So, let's continue our series on Why Take Risk When You Don't Have to, Part 2. Well, welcome, folks, to the Worry-Free Retirement. And yes, I am that little man in the sweater vest, retirement planning specialist, and the world's friendliest financial advisor, Tony Walker. And before we help you understand why taking boatloads of risk with your money is so unnecessary, let me introduce two young lads who never take risk with my money when producing this show each week. America's favorite financial sidekick, Mr. Aaron Orander, along with Louisville, Kentucky's most laid-back graphics artist, Mr. Derek Hudson. Okay. Let's set the stage. You are either retired or staring retirement in the face, or maybe you are still working with no plans on retiring, but you are over the age of 59 and a half and did not realize you could move that risky 401k over to someone like Tony Walker Financial, an independent retirement firm that currently offers financial products and strategies more than likely not currently offered by your 401k plan. Well, if you're tired of the roller coaster ride of the stock market and ready to move your money to safer territory, you've got a problem, especially when the stock market is in a current free fall. When, or if now, is the time to get out of the market or at least reduce your exposure to it? Well, as you're about to see, there really is no way of knowing the answer to that question, which begs the original question. Since nobody can predict what the stock market will do, and since this is a show dedicated to retirement planning, let's just take a look at over the time of what the stock market has done and how risky it truly can be. First, who can forget the stock market crash of 1929, known today as simply the Great Depression? Between the years of 1929 and 1932, when the stock market would lose 86% of its value, meaning if you had $100,000 at the start of 29 before the crash, you'd end up with only around $10,000 by 1932. Next up, Monday, October 19th, 1987, when the Dow fell over 22%, listen, in just one day. Can you imagine going to bed Sunday night with $100,000 in your account only to wake up and watch your $100,000 tumble to around $78,000 by the end of the first day? The third biggest drop in the stock market, what is now referred to as the dot-com bubble crash, which took place between 2000 and 2002, losing 37% of its value. So again, in that example, if you started 2000 with $100,000, by the end of 2002, you'd have around $63,000. Next up, what is referred to in the annals of the stock market crashes as simply 2008. A time when many savers lost more than 50% of their 401k plans to a crash that began in October of 2007 and finally concluded around March of 2009. So again, you started 2007 with $100,000. By the time 2009 rolls around, you got about $50,000. And finally, lest we forget the devastating effects of COVID, both in the way of health issues, loss of lives, and the disastrous decision our politicians made in shutting down society in general, as the stock market values plummeted more than 30 3%. So, Tony, you ask, are you saying the current downturn will rival these huge losses? No, I'm not saying that at all, because no one knows whether this is a downturn that will continue on or maybe just a blip on the radar screen. What I'm saying is that no matter how smart someone thinks they are, history has proven itself time and time again that nobody can predict what the stock market will do, which is all the more reason we must circle back to our original question and the theme of today's show: why take risk when you don't have to? Part 2. Stay tuned. I'm Tony Walker, and we will be right back to answer this question so we can get you and your money on the road to a worry-free retirement. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Melissa Arnell. One of my roles here at Tony Walker Financial is assisting with the annual review process and initiating income plan audits to ensure things are on track. Each month, our department is responsible for running a detailed report to track our clients' plans and progress moving forward. This annual process involves comparing current account balances against the planned balance, ensuring that the client is on track with the original game plan. If for whatever reason the plan is not on track, we will immediately reach out to the client to speak with either Tony or one of our other salaried fiduciaries to discuss the next best course of action. Our unique income audit process is just another way we monitor our client game plans so they can enjoy their worry-free retirement.
It is estimated that each day over 11,000 people will turn 65, which means a lot of advisors selling a lot of annuities. Don't get stuck in the wrong annuity. Get a second opinion from TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
From the minute we walked in the door, we felt comfortable. The options were laid out clear to us. It was explained thoroughly. We couldn't have asked for anything more.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement. Tony Walker here. And as we watch this market go up and down as we record this show on April 8th, 2025, I thought it would be interesting to bring in two young lads to the Worry-Free Retirement Studios. To my left, Mr. Wes Walker, fellow fiduciary, and of course to his left, my favorite son-in-law, Trey Juergens, another fiduciary here. So good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. So I guess we got to start off with these phone calls that we get. I mean, we have over 3,500 clients. 2,800 accounts now, I think, with Schwab roughly. So you all take a lot of those calls. So again, yesterday, let's take April 7th, for example, the market was down heavily. Wes, how do you handle some of these calls from clients, and what are our clients saying or asking about when they make these calls to us?
Sure. Well, I think that's a lot of the value that we add. You know, we're able to respond to people when they do have concerns about the stock market. I think once they get to talking to us, they realize in most cases how little they have in stocks if they're in retirement to begin with. So the typical conversation kind of breaks down like this. We'll go over their total assets with us, their total liquid net worth, and then try to figure out what percentage of that is in the stock market. Talked to a gentleman yesterday, has roughly $800,000 in liquid assets, but turns out that he only has 8% of his liquid net worth in stocks. Now, of course, he's watching the stock market fall. But even if he was to suffer a 50% drawdown, it's only a 4% loss of his total net worth. So I think categorizing it in those terms is very helpful.
Yeah, and we were just talking about that yesterday, Trey. I think you always like to refer to when people call in and they're a little nervous and they forget that we don't usually have all their money in the market. You refer to that pie concept. Explain the pie concept and kind of dovetail on what Wes was talking about.
Yeah, same thing. It's really just how much of your assets are exposed to equities being stocks or funds made up of stocks. So when you look at annuities, savings in the bank, things like that have no equity exposure, and you really kind of back into how much market exposure they have. They're used to seeing the S&P and the Dow. They're down so much. What's going on? All this red at the bottom of the TV screen. With us, in reality, very minimal equity exposure really exists.
And speak to that person out there, and we'll start with you, Trey, because we're getting a lot of this. People want to roll their 401ks over to Tony Walker Financial. And again, by the time this show airs, this will be aired during Derby week. I mean, the market could be up or down, who knows? But what would you say to those people who call in and say, hey, I'm ready to move over. I've met with Tony. I love your game plan, but the market's down now. Should I move over that 401k now or wait?
You can never time the market. I think the only thing better than catching lightning in a bottle is just getting a plan in place. And when you have a plan and you have a way to see that you don't have to take all that risk and you can still pull off how much income you need in retirement, that's really all savers are looking for.
Yeah, we had a gentleman come in yesterday, and we had already presented the plan. He came back in to discuss it, and he said, well, I don't know if I wanted to do this, but to be honest, I don't know if I want to do it now. His account, his 401k had dropped, I think it was around $100,000. I grabbed the plan back out. We looked at some of the variables we had, and we hadn't even put all the money on the plan. We do things like this intentionally. I said, sir, we have $300,000 that we had stockpiled to the side. We're not even on the plan. You could still retire. And he was very relieved over that. So another thing, Wes, you and I talk about this too. Let's speak to the fact that, yeah, the market's down, but if somebody's really thinking about retirement, really if we go back roughly a year, I don't know exactly the time frame, but if you go back a year, even though the market's gone up, has anybody really lost money compared to where they might have been a year ago? You kind of see where I'm going with that logic.
It's possible, yeah, that they might be down slightly, but they're not down in any sort of grandiose terms, not down 10% or 20% from last year. They're probably about flat, roughly, at the time of this recording from where they would have been. And then something that's interesting, too, with interest rates being higher, there are some safer alternatives out there. So people, a couple years ago when interest rates were low, you were kind of forced into equities. You had to take risks because there was no place to get yield out there. But now that interest rates are up, there are safer alternatives. I know a little bit divergent from your point, but that is a fact that's going on now.
Yeah, let's speak to that. And one of the things we love around here, because we haven't been able to sell them for years, and it's becoming a great tool for us, for those people that are just saying, hey, get some of this money out of the market. Speak to the fact of a MYGA. What is a MYGA and how do we utilize that product?
Yeah, absolutely. So a MYGA is a fixed annuity. It pays a guaranteed interest rate each year. You can choose to have that interest paid out to you or retained inside the contract. It functions similar to a CD at the bank. You just get simple interest each year, and a 5-year MYGA at the time of this recording is around 5.5%. Those rates can change, but that's pretty good for not having really any risk at all.
Yeah, and unlike bonds, there's no downside risk with interest rates. Plus, it kind of hurts us. We just get a small commission paid by the company. So it doesn't come out of your pockets, folks, if you do a MYGA. But also, we don't have to charge fees on that money. So if you had $200,000, and let's say our average fee is 1%, that's $2,000 a year they're saving, assuming they keep the MYGA to its maturity. So, Trey, speak to this a little bit, because I know a lot of times I'll meet with people. They agree to move forward. We call it the down the hall. I take them down the hall to see you. And talk about this split IRA concept that we created years ago. How has this been a game changer for us and also for our clients who might want a little bit of stock market exposure, but the ability to see these buckets and understand when they can take money out?
Yeah, so with our game plans, this in an elementary way puts in exactly what we're doing for them. There's a lot more behind this, but to understand that they can take their 401k, IRAs that they've rolled over previous plans and put it into this split IRA concept, it gives them access and liquidity with that Schwab, but also mailbox money on the back end. So having that ability, knowing they're not going to run out of money, having that liquid access with minimal fees on the front end, pulling a 401k that may have had upwards of 70% in the market and putting it in this that may, like Wes said, sometimes you're 10, 20 or less percent in the market overall. You take a lot of risk off the table and you have a plan in place.
Yeah, I know a gentleman came in yesterday, he and his wife, and I think they're going to move forward, but it was a complicated plan. You had different Social Security. There were WEP provisions that they weren't familiar with. And then I showed them this. We had multiple annuities. It was more complicated than this, but I went back to this and I said, we're going to handle all the details behind the scenes. A lot of advisors are trying to emulate this. A lot of them can sell the same products. But the process we have in place, folks like you, all of our staff to implement this, that's where the game changer is. And it allows us to keep their money safe at the same time. So gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. Folks, we're going to take a quick time out. We'll be right back.
The following clients were not compensated for their testimonials of Tony Walker Financial. Their experience may not reflect the experience of all clients and is not a guarantee of future results.
Want to know what savers were saying right before the stock market crash of 2008?
At our age, we just don't want to be on the roller coaster of the stock market anymore.
I'm not satisfied with my mutual funds at all.
Stop putting your money at risk when you don't have to. Learn how to safeguard more of your retirement savings by logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 877-499-9255. Recently, an article which appeared in Investment News dated January 27, 2025, really caught my attention. The headline reads as follows: 6 in 10 people think they need to save 30 annual salaries for retirement. Now, folks, I've never heard of a concept like this, and I'm not sure why savers think this much money is needed to save for retirement. In fact, with over 3,500 clients at Tony Walker Financial, if we do the math here, we assume that the average person or household, let's say, makes $100,000 per year. So that means the average saver thinks they need 30 times 100. Folks, that is $3 million needed for retirement. And with the majority of our clients having nowhere near this kind of money, how in the world are we able to pull off a worry-free retirement for those savers? And why would these savers think they need so much money? The problem is the financial world and something we address all the time called OPM. You see, OPM, or other people's money, is a concept the financial world lives by. That's right. We need your money to make money on your money. Without it, kind of like Dracula, we die. So why would the financial world instill all of these crazy thoughts of inflation and living too long? They want you to have more and more money, and they don't want you to spend it. That's why people think they need all this money. So let's take a look at the different concepts that exist between what we call the worry-free retirement and the financial world. So the financial world, let's say you're age 65, first of all, they're assuming everybody lives to age 100 or whatever it is, and that could happen. And this is why we always instill that people with the worry-free retirement put in something we call mailbox money. Because the mailbox money makes sure you don't run out of money. But as we're getting ready to see in a minute, that's really not how retirement plays out. You don't literally save more and more money to combat inflation and long-term care and taxes. In fact, more and more money, I've found this doing for 40 years now, usually compounds the problems. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but believe me, the more money you have as you age, the more you're going to worry and the more fears that are created, whether it's fear of going into a nursing home, fear of this stuff being taxed to death when you die. So it makes no sense to just keep accumulating all this money. So what we did in the worry-free retirement, this was years ago, and I covered this in my first book, The Worry-Free Retirement. Again, over 20 years ago, I started specializing in this. We created something called the 3 halves of life. And what's important is, during halftime, this is when you need to enjoy and spend some of this money. Notice if this represents your net worth, so to speak, we actually want that coming down. We don't want it going up. This is a philosophical difference, and we've proven that this is the way to handle money from the financial world. The financial world doesn't want to give this money back to you because that's less money for them. But you say, well, Tony, what about this fear of running out of money? I don't want to run out of money. You always talk about your granddad and having that pension. How do I make sure I don't run out of money? That's where during the second half, depending on your situation, most of our clients have that. That's where we insert the types of annuities that provide us that mailbox money. So folks, if you're looking at this, and if this seems to make sense to you, that you should use and enjoy the money while you still can, if you should try to keep your assets to a point where they're not growing at some point, but you're either giving them away to loved ones now while you're alive or enjoying it before it's too late, we need to talk. And we've made this so easy to do. It's called the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. To take advantage of talking to me about your situation, just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, or anytime you can call us 24/7. That toll-free number is 877-499-9255. We'll be right back.
The individuals in this interview are uncompensated clients at the time of filming. Their opinions expressed were provided to Worry-Free Productions for use as an advertisement by Tony Walker Financial. Please refer to Form CRS and Form ADV Part 2B Disclosure Brochure for information regarding the advisory services offered by Tony Walker Financial.
Our client spotlight today shines brightly on Mr. Doug Cox. And Mr. Cox, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Now, first of all, tell us a little bit about what you did. I know you've recently retired, but what you're doing now.
Well, I retired in May. I did machinist work for many years, and right now just enjoying retirement and the good life, and working with my brother in the horse racing business.
And if you could go back in time, how did you first learn about Tony Walker Financial?
Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was just watching on the weekends. I'd watch your broadcast, and the more I watched, the more I thought, this sounds really interesting. Like, I'd like to hear more what y'all do, and from the saver's perspective of things, and that's what initiated my call to talk to you.
So really that idea, that message that we really don't like to take a lot of risk, we want to make sure our clients don't run out of money, that just resonated with you?
Yeah, fit me to the T, really. It really did, because I'm more into hanging on to what I got, and I'm not a big risk taker, gambler, that kind of thing, and it's worked out well.
Where did the interest in horses start?
Well, it's all about my brother. I mean, I grew up around the racetrack, but I was just part-time. I wasn't as involved like he is, and it just consumed him. And there's a bit of difference in our age, so he's just like a generation younger, and he went over there and he never left, so as he got more involved in it, I just kind of followed along. But my involvement's nowhere near his, because I worked a public job doing machinist work where he was going to the racetrack. and he stayed there, and it's been a lot of fun. I help him in a lot of other ways, I feel like, other than just the horse business, because it's so consuming of his time. He can call me, and that frees him up to stay focused on the horse business, because it really is like 24/7. And now with me having some free time and being retired, it works out well. It really does.
What's it been like working with the staff here at Tony Walker Financial?
It's been great, because it's all, it's new territory to me. And I've been educated, I've found out a whole lot. And the complete staff, top to bottom, the crew in Bowling Green that you have, and here, it's just really been great.
Well, Mr. Cox, we appreciate your business, and thank you so much, and hopefully many years of service to come.
Oh, well, I hope so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Looking for an advisor you can trust? Schedule your free phone call with Tony at TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 1-877-499-9255.
Pretty much every time the stock market would crash, I would stress out and probably cry. Once we did go see Tony Walker, it pretty much took all of the anxiety, all of the stress. Every single day it just took it away from me. So now I feel much more comfortable. I feel a lot better about our finances. Okay. And Tony Walker changed our lives.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement, and we continue our discussion with two of my fellow fiduciaries here in the Louisville office, Mr. Wes Walker and Mr. Trey Juergens. And gentlemen, we've been talking about, again, as we record this show on April 8th, 2025, we don't know what the market's going to do, but basically a little bit about our split IRA. I want to get into that, and then I'm going to get into another element, some things you found, Trey. But back to the split IRA. What's so interesting about this is, again, it does usually include annuities, but how much people are starting to use annuities. In fact, this is a recent article that came up. It said, here's why. This came out in Investment News, March 19th of this year. Imagine this article 10 years ago, Trey or Wes. Here's why more annuities will be showing up in retirement plans. So they're even talking about trying to insert them in 401k plans. Here's another article. In fact, by the way, we're collecting all these seminar invitations that you're getting to dinner seminars. Folks, if you see anything about how to not outlive your money, they're talking about annuities. Here's another article that came out in March of this year. 2/3 of investors worried they'll outlive their assets. So again, Trey, speak very briefly about the idea of these income annuities that we use, something we call mailbox money, and how they can keep people from running out of money.
Yeah, so lifetime income in these annuities, mailbox money as you call it, is super popular with savers. We've known that for decades. When I first started about 8 years ago, the way you talked about these annuities and the way that you kind of positioned these for savers was super contrarian to what the big boys were saying. So, I mean, the large custodians were really bashing any time that you tried to attempt to roll over or move funds into an annuity, and now they're sticking them in 401k plans.
And then, Wes, I know you work with a lot of the investments at our firm. Knowing we've got on the back end that mailbox money sitting out there waiting to be deployed, when you're looking at somebody's investments, or even now they're talking to you and they're worried about their investments or their accounts are down a little bit, how do you address that, and what do you do to remind them of the certainty that we have with that mailbox money?
With that mailbox money built in, there is such a powerful implicit guarantee that they're going to have an income stream in the future that to go back and really worry too much about the market in the near term, it doesn't make too much sense, because they really don't have a large percentage of their assets in the market. That annuity waiting out in the wings does serve as a permission slip to go on and use your money that you have in Schwab now. And a lot of times, depending on the case, we might have an account that a person is drawing from now that's not very, aggressively invested. It's just kind of a near-term bucket. But they might put some money in Schwab for growth that's earmarked to just let it go into the future. And with that, they do have more risk, but they realize that they have a longer time horizon for those assets.
Yeah, that happened recently. I think we did do that. Somebody came in and their accounts were a little bit down, and they said, can we start this mailbox money now? On the game plan, it was later on, but we went on and started it for that very reason, so they could let that Schwab account build back up.
I would say that's the benefit of having the flexibility and having a trained retirement specialist with you, because anyone could sell that product. Anyone could sell an income annuity, show you a graph of how it will perform, or they think it'll perform, and then you're off to the races. But you would have to make the decision on when to take that income yourself. If you're working with someone like Tony Walker Financial, we can help guide you on when to take that income and if it makes sense to take it earlier than planned.
That's a really good point. And then in our remaining time, in the essence of time, as Trey likes to say, this was really interesting. I mean, let's face it, and Trey, I know you're involved somewhat in the marketing here, and we have these marketing meetings, and Aaron and Derek and Gina, we sit around and talk about the different spots because we can do so much spots in the production company we have with Aaron and Derek. Sometimes we even have too much information. But let's just boil it down here. If we were to say anything right now in April of 2025, all these baby boomers retiring, all this uncertainty in the world, the stock market's up and down, what do you think is the one key issue? What should somebody really think about before moving their money over to any advisor? What's the one word they ought to think about?
Trust.
And why do you say that?
Well, a lot of articles right in front of me have that to say, that trust is the number one indicator.
Yeah, because this is really interesting. You did some work on this. Go through some of this right here. These are interesting statistics.
Yeah, so Investopeda did an advisor insight survey. 70% of respondents said trust is the number one factor when choosing an advisor. That's actually ranked higher than credentials, experience, and investment performance.
That is insane. I would have never guessed that. Keep reading. What else did you find out?
Morningstar, 87% say they value honesty and transparency over actual investment performance.
Can I stop you there real quick? I had a lady come in yesterday. The guy claims he was a fiduciary, literally put over $400,000 in an annuity. She didn't know what it was. She wanted me to get her out of it. Took it out last year. She can't get out of it. The penalty is ridiculous. And she said he never shared anything about penalties. So that's what we mean by transparency, folks. Make sure you're asking the questions you need to ask. Keep going. This is cool.
Yeah, another one, Schwab, an independent advisor outlook study. I think we're actually part of that. We submit information for that. 93% of investors say that trust is the foundation of long-term loyalty in an advisor. Something obviously, when you're choosing a retirement planner, that's sometimes a 3-decade relationship you're looking for, that you really want that trust.
And then finally, this actually, let's see, with high net worth individuals, share this one. I didn't really look at this closely. Read this one off.
Yeah, so 82% say trustworthiness. It was the main reason was staying with a current financial advisor, and only 39% said returns were the primary reason for staying with an advisor.
And, that's coming up more and more. I'll have sometimes people come in, we look at their statements, and Wes, you probably see this. You look at a lot of statements. Actually, the returns haven't been that bad. And I'll say, well, why are you wanting to move your money over to us? And they say, I don't know. There's just something that doesn't feel right, which I think, back to this one, they don't even know how to measure the returns. I'm looking at going, those are pretty good returns. Have you seen that happen before, Wes? What do you think it is that they're just like, is it back to a trust issue?
I think they want to plan, first of all. I think they trust, what our firm does. They trust us to handle the money. And I would just say, too, not comparing other advisors to Bernie Madoff, but if you looked at Bernie Madoff's returns for 30 years, they almost never had a down year. It was always positive, but the money wasn't there. So I think that's what this kind of speaks to. The trust factor that the person is working in your best interest and obviously not stealing from you is more important than just generating high returns year after year.
And folks, that's a great place to leave it off. So if that's you right now, maybe you're looking for somebody to trust and you've got some money in a 401k, IRA, and you're sitting there thinking, man, I don't know what to do with this money. I'm retired, getting ready to retire. Why don't you do this? Why don't you take advantage of something we call the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call where you and I will talk. That's right, the owner of the company, to find out more about your situation. If it merits, we will meet with you in person to put together this free game plan to show you how we work at Tony Walker Financial. So take advantage of that right now. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, TonyWalkerFinancial.com. Click on that Let's Get Started or call us anytime at 877-499-9255. Well, folks, that's all the time we have today. We'll be looking forward to talking to you next week on the Worry-Free Retirement. But between now and then, if all else fails, You be worry-free and make it a good one.